So this is David Foreman from AccountNet, and he's going to start with accounts payable.
So I'm David Foreman from AccountNet. I've been a consultant with GP for over 30 years, and I recently got certified in BC, so it's a fairly new product for me. So, but my background again is in GP, so I'm going to try to point out some of the similarities and differences between this and GP and SL as we go along. For purchasing, we're going to start in the vendor window, and I'm not going to go too deep in anything here because we want to give you just a sort of a broad overview of what's available. This is our vendor listing here. As Owen showed you, the screen is customizable. So what I've done is I've cut it down to just the vendor number, the vendor name, and their outstanding balance. And I can drill down if I can click on their outstanding balance here, and I can actually see the invoices that are outstanding for the customer, for the vendor here. And we're going to look at this. This is what's called a customer ledger. A vendor ledger, and we'll look at this in a little bit more detail in a minute. But you can see how easy it is to just sort of click and get information. So if we go into the vendor setup itself, you can see it's, this is pretty standard in all ERP systems. There's the general information, which is the vendor's number and their name and so on, their address and contact information. The piece here that I want to focus on is, and I think this is one of the nice features of BC, is that you can divide your vendors by how you pay them. So and we're going to get into this. It'll matter more in a minute when I show you how to make ACH payments or print checks. But what we'll do is we'll divide up the vendors based on how we pay them. So we want to select all our ACH vendors, see what we owe them, create an ACH download, upload, and bring back to the bank. Separately, we want to print hard paper checks. We want to just pull those vendors that take only checks. So you can see here that this vendor here, this Fabricam, is set up as an ACH vendor. These are all user definable. I created these in the system so I could separate the vendors that way. So we see you have ACH, and then we also have check vendors. One other things, I'm not going to show you this, but we can set up default GL accounts for the vendor so that every time you enter an invoice for the vendor, it will default to that GL account. You can use that. We'll cut down on the errors, but you can also override it. You can split the transaction as much as you want, and you'll see in a minute in the transaction entry window. If we go into the vendor ledger from here, so from vendor, I'm just going to click on ledger entries. You can see this is all the activity that's ever been recorded for this vendor. If we wanted to see, and you mentioned before, like we have a paid invoice here. One of the columns here is the remaining balance, which over here, the remaining amount. So if I put this in ascending order, and I go down here to where my paid invoices are, if I get a call from a vendor, and this is a feature that I like, and they say, I sent you this invoice, 106086, was it paid? You can just click on the ellipses on the right here, and it pulls up a menu that you can see, so we can see what entries were applied to the invoice, and we can say to the vendor, yes, it was paid on 6/13/21, and that's our check number. So it's a quick easy way to do research when you need to. This grid can be filtered. If let's say we wanted to look at just invoices for this vendor, then we could click on the document type, and I can click on filter, and this brings up my filtering over here on the left side. It prompts me with the document type, and if I say I just want to look at invoices and check invoices and then tab out of the window, then now all that's left on the screen is invoices. And I can actually, if you use SmartList or some other kind of query tool, one thing that's nice about this is you can actually save the view, the filtering. So the next time I come into this window for either this vendor or any other vendor, I can just click on the invoices view that I created, and it will filter it automatically. So that's a quick overview of the vendor card. So the next thing I want to show you is how we can put an invoice in here. So we're going to go from the main menu to the purchasing module, and we're going to go directly to purchase invoices. Close up this window. Right, this is what's like in GP. If you're familiar with GP, there is stuff in batches that have not been posted yet. They're waiting for review or whatever, and then they'll be posted later. This window it shows you the contents of everything that hasn't been posted. Right now we have nothing in there, so we're going to create a new invoice. And this is our invoice entry window. I'm just going to open this up more, and as Owen said before, you can either type in what you know, or you can click on the lookup or the drop down and choose the vendor that you wanted to pay, or again, you could type it in if you wanted to. The required fields here are starred with a red asterisk. It wants a vendor invoice number, so we're going to call this the March 2023. Oops, let me just spell March right. And down in the second section is where we're actually going to distribute the invoice. So we have this is the line that's coming from the vendor setup. Remember I said before, when we were in the vendor card, we can assign the vendor to a default general ledger account. So this vendor Fabricam has been assigned by default to the repairs and maintenance, the 61200 account. So we can change this, but this is what we're prompted with when we come in. We can, as I go along here, again, I customized the screen to make it simpler and easier for me to work with once I got in here. Our quantity is 1. It's a $1,200 invoice, and it calculates the total for us. And here's where we can actually assign the department code. And the division. Again, these are our global parameters, our global dimensions, and we're asking that this be filled in for this vendor for this transaction. As Owen pointed out before, you can make these optional, you can make them mandatory, you could default the vendor to a particular department or division, and again, what you want to try to do is cut down on the number of errors that can happen when people are key punching, and just give them as few opportunities to make mistakes as possible. We saw that this vendor is set up as an ACH vendor, so this invoice is automatically going to go into the ACH bucket. If you have a vendor that is an ACH vendor and then they want a check instead, you can go in and change the payment method. So you can mail them a check or vice versa, change them to ACH. But you would do that on an invoice by invoice method. So once we have our information here, we can actually also have multiple distributions for this one invoice. As long as it adds up to the total of the invoice. We can then, under the posting menu, we can preview the posting of the invoice. And you can see there are a lot of different ledgers that come up here. The one we're obviously going to be most interested in is the GL entry. Just let me expand this. And we can see that the entry is a debit to the repairs and maintenance expense and a credit to accounts payable. And once we're satisfied with that, as Owen mentioned before, you could, there is a built-in workflow here that you could actually, before you could post this, you could request the approval and send an approval request for somebody else to actually approve it, so then you could post it. Or if you have the ability and there's no workflow, then you can just post the entry from here. So that's invoice entry. Any questions? Go ahead.
1099.
Yeah, 1099, that was, let me go back to the window. So down here, you would say whether it was tax liable or not. You would check it off.
And then within the vendor, you can also
Within the vendor,
specify.
right. It's in the vendor setup, and then you would say for this particular invoice for this vendor, whether this is 1099able or not.
Okay, so what about box number? We have vendors who are like box 7, box 2.
Right, so if we go back to vendor setup, that's where that's indicated. So if we go to purchasing vendors, and we look down here in the tax area,
So you can't do
This
it
is-
on transaction level.
You can, right? That,
yeah, I guess you could, yeah, you can define it there. I probably have taken some of that out of here for demonstration
okay,
purposes, but
right,
that is available.
Yeah.
but that tax liable box that you showed before, is that on per line item?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so it's per line item.
Yeah, you could do it per
Right,
line
except
item,
that
right.
sometimes
Control
we
that.
have people that get
Exactly, yeah.
in a payment,
Yep.
they're getting, some of it's royalties, some of
Yep.
it's reimbursement
Right.
for
Yep,
expense.
yep. So then this could handle it like SL does.
Right.
It's
Right,
by
right.
line item.
What David showed, he did show that, and like what Owen showed, each of these screens can be personalized, so what's David saying is he did hide some of the
Right,
columns.
to-
Yeah,
create the demo, that
right,
makes
yeah,
sense.
to make it
Yeah.
simpler.
So within the vendor, we can see what the approved 1099 amounts are per vendor?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes. Actually, I'll show you reports at the end, and you can, when we get there, you'll see that. So the next step I wanted to show you in the disbursement process was actually cutting checks. So in BC, all the cash management, cash-related functions are in cash management. They're not in purchasing. You're not cutting checks out of purchasing. You're actually cutting them out of the cash management module. And we have something here called payment journals. And what I've done here is I've set up 3 different payment journals, one for ACH, one for checks, and then another sort of miscellaneous ones. So when I want to create an ACH run, if I want to, do a check run, I'm going to go into my payment journal, and what you can do here, I'm not sure what's comparable in SL, but in GP you can build a batch, and you make a sort of a
selection.
what is it?
Payment selection.
Payment selection. So basically, we're going to make a broad sweep, and then we're going to cut it down. We're going to say, well, let's look at all the vendors that have something due at the end of this month, and then we'll figure out who we're going to pay from there. So in order to do that, there's something called suggest vendor payments here. So I'm going to make the last payment date 4/30. Again, just because I have demo data in here, it's the only reason I'm doing that. I can, if I have a limited amount of funds, I can put that amount in here, and it will limit the payments that are selected based on that amount. Let's say I have only $10,000 to spend. Based on your vendor priorities, you could put that in. If there's no limit, if you just want to get everybody, you would just put in 0. When on one of the selections here is summarized per vendor. So here you can, I know this is on GP, it's one check per vendor, or one payment, one ACH per vendor, or one vendor per check. So like usually we combine the invoices that we have for one vendor into one check. So that's what this is about, summarizing per vendor. Okay, we're going to use the 4/30 posting date like I had for the cutoff date. Actually, no, it's just 3/31, sorry. And then down here, because this is the type of payment that we're going to make. So we're saying the payment type that we're going to make is an electronic payment, because that's what these vendors want. And the payment method code on our vendor filter is ACH. So remember, we assigned the vendors to either ACH or check, and now we're saying, okay, give us all the vendors that are assigned to ACH. I'm going to click OK here, and it creates, let me go back first. Okay, so here we are. So here it's pulled in, you can see the total amounts that are due for each of these vendors. So we have Fabricam 34,641 and so on. We can change these amounts. Let's say we only want to pay Fabricam $20,000. We can just overwrite this, or $2,000. Any of these we can change, as well as on the right here. Remember, each one of these is an individual payment to a vendor. And if we want to see what's being paid, we can go to the Applies to Doc field here, and we can see what invoices are being paid. We can also change that in here. So the amount that we're applying could be changed as well to the individual invoices. Okay, so you play with this, make it the way to pay who you want. Then in the end, the first thing you're gonna do is send remittance advices to the vendor, so let them know. I gotta turn off the approvals. 1 second. Owen.
No, it would ask you to approve.
Yeah. So let me just turn off this journal. Turn this off.
That's not me.
So, actually, what I'm going to do is I want to start again because of that. Let me just select more. It'll take 2 seconds. Let me just do that so we don't run into any problems. I'm going to delete. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to go to prepare, suggest vendor payments. And we already had it set up so that we're going to make an electronic payment and we're selecting the ACH vendors. Say OK. And then here are our payments. So what I can do here is I'm going to go, the next step again here is for the bank. We're going to export the remittance advices. So I click OK here. It generates the remittance advices, which can either be emailed or mailed to the vendors. Let me open this up. So you can see this is what we're paying. This is just an advice of what we're paying. And that gets sent to the vendor so that they can, when they see that you made a deposit into their account, they can see what invoices were being paid. Just close this up. So then the final thing is to generate the EFT file. We'll take a look at that. And here's our EFT file, which is, meaningful to a bank.
Does it create a matcha file?
That is a matcha file.
That is it, yeah. So this is what you would then upload
Right.
to your bank. If we had printed checks instead of creating ACHs, we would, and we were using positive pay, we can go over to the accounts. Bank accounts. And then it's as simple as uploading it here. Process. Positive pay export is there. And you can see what this looks like. If we had printed checks, and then we need to send those to the bank to get them to be verified. Okay. Let's quickly look at receivables, and then we'll quickly look at
Trying to do bank rec?
you want to do bank rec next? Okay, so let's look at bank rec next. So I'm staying in cash management. I have my bank account reconciliation shortcut that I
Hold
created.
on, I guess before we go to bank recs, does anyone have any questions about accounts payable at all? Entering the vendor's invoice, payment of the invoice. So no questions on that right now. Okay. All right, and you know what? Maybe just just go.
Okay. Okay. I'm actually gonna delete this one, start a new one. So I'm gonna create a new bank rec. First, I'm gonna choose which bank account I want to work with. I'm gonna use my checking account. And there are two sides to this, which I think is a really nice feature. I don't know if you've used Nolan Bank Rec or anything like that, but to be able to see the GL entries on one side and the bank transactions on the other side and then be able to match them as opposed to having to look in two different places is a nice feature. So one of the things that you can do here also is you can import the bank statement. So we've downloaded a bank statement that we're going to go out and grab from from our computer. I'm going to say choose. And I think so what we just did was we brought in all the entries from the bank. We downloaded the entries into an Excel file or whatever, and then we're able to then import them directly here.
Is there any tweaking involved, or is it simple download and import?
There's a little bit of tweaking involved because it needs to be formatted in a way that this can read it. But there's really only 4 fields. You know what I mean? It's the date, the description, the amount, and the type of transaction that it is, whether it's a disbursement or a receipt. And then you can match manually or you can match automatically based on criteria like the date and the amount match and things like that. The other thing that you can do here is if you see an entry that's not on your general ledger, you can actually create a journal entry straight from here. I know it's right. It's not working right. That's probably something I need to tweak. But the whole idea is that you can then hit the general ledger with anything that's missing from your GL that you find on your bank statement without having to wait to book it later on. So that's a very quick, obviously, tour of bank rec, but you can see that it's pulling in all the information for you and it makes it pretty easy at the end of the month. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about here was sales. Basically, it's the flip side of purchasing. We take a look at customers, similar arrangement, again, name, address, and so on. And we can actually classify our customers by the dimensions. We can see that like this customer has been included in the dimension code customer group as a ZDD reimbursement type customer, and this helps us in later analysis. So you can either group your customers together or group your vendors together and then be able to run reports based on that selection criteria.
So I guess you're saying that dimensions are not only used for like the account
Correct.
structure,
Right.
but as a way to, say, group vendors or customers together as well.
Right, thank you. Much well put. So again, transactions here, like on the purchasing side, sales, we're going to be creating a sales invoice. We're going to create a new one. And you can see the window is pretty much the same as we saw on the payable side. And here again, we have default distribution accounts for the customer at Datum Corporation. This is their default account. I can change this if I need to, but again, it cuts down on the errors that might be made.
All right, okay,
Yeah.
take your time.
Sorry.
So like also remember about the dimension codes that are available as well.
Right. So here as well, like we had on the payable side, I can code this to one of my departments, and as well as a division. I know it's 408. I'm just going to go there. The description here, we can overwrite this. This is coming from the GL account description. We can just call it the sales, and so on. The amount, what we
I
put
guess
in.
it also handles taxes as well.
Right.
Per line item.
Yes. Yes. These are, again, if you have other dimensions that you've added besides the two global ones, which we have as division and department, then you could add these on to the end to further classify the transaction. So you could put it into an expense group. Again, these are all just dimensions that we've added and added values to. So it's another way for us to categorize the transactions. There's an
Just because some of the people that are here, I know questions that have come up in the past, these can be imported in, like there was a transaction import. Owen was saying you could do it in the GL, you could also do configuration imports into the AR screen. Things like description, those are longer descriptions now. Usually in SL you would confine to like 30 characters. These things are now usually 100 characters. You still have a lot of more customization capabilities on invoices and reports and things like that. I just know that from the people here, sometimes things like description or importing is critical in sometimes these things, and this is where the advantages of Business Central has. It has these extra lengths and things like that. So those functionalities that were in SL are technically still here in Business Central. It's just a different way of accessing it, usually a little bit more flexibility maybe with the lengths on things.
And as Owen started to show you before, is that you can add attachments to any one of your transactions, so that if for whatever reason there isn't enough room for you to say what you want to say on that screen, you can always attach files to it. So if we browse out, we can just bring these in from as PDFs or whatever, contracts, similar kinds of things that you might want to be able to be able to get your hands on quickly if you needed to from here.
So David, I'm not sure if I stepped out, but what screens or areas can they change the field names or hide something? Like
All of them, basically. All of them. Any window that you're on.
So maybe you should
Yeah, so-
personalize.
Yeah. So if we go into this one, what I can do here is on any one of these fields, let's say I don't need this field, your reference here. If I'm just clicking on it and I can say remove. And so I can clean up the screens this way. I can always get it back if I need to. I don't, you don't want to be in a situation where you have lost a field.
Could you do colors?
I'm not sure.
I don't know. I don't think so.
I'm not sure.
One thing is that this can be personalized per user potentially. So like if you don't have a user that needs a field, it can be just for the one user. But there are also configuration packs that you could say like for one department, they're all supposed to have a screen that looks this way.
Or all the accounts payable people
Exactly.
to have the same screen, for instance. You can
But
put them in a group and then give them all the same.
Or you can do it for yourselves even, and you have that type of flexibility.
And then you can add fields as well. So what happens with that is if you have like, let's say, 4 dimensions that you always want to post to, think of it as like 4 segments in your sub-account number. You can add those segments here and then decide what order you want those segments to be presented in for the user. So you've got some flexibility in taking fields away, adding fields, reordering fields. So you make it that it makes sense for what your data entry is.